Daniel Marsh never believed in ghosts. As a young, sharp-tongued journalist for the Boston Beacon, his job was to hunt down local legends and tear them apart with logic, evidence, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. That was his niche, and people loved him for it. So when an anonymous envelope landed on his desk with no return address and a single sheet of aged paper folded inside, he assumed it was another reader tip or prank. But the message gave him pause. Spend one night in the house on Mirror Hill and write the truth. If you leave before dawn, you'll carry it with you forever. No explanation, no signature, just those chilling words. At first, he laughed it off, but something about the handwriting, elegant, almost ceremonial, made him look up the location. Mirror Hill. That name stirred something faint in his memory. A quick search reminded him, the Harrow Mansion. Everyone in Ashcroft knew about it. It had been abandoned since 1972 after the entire Harrow family, father, mother, 2 children, vanished without a trace. No bodies, no signs of a struggle. The town whispered about seances gone wrong, cursed mirrors, a daughter who talked to things in the glass. Rumors varied, but the house remained untouched, a local haunt surrounded by trees that grew too close and wind that never ceased. For Daniel, it was perfect. A new article, a new myth to burn down with facts. He packed his gear, a high-powered flashlight, backup batteries, a thermos of black coffee, a digital recorder, a notebook, and an old-school Polaroid camera for dramatic effect. Just before sunset, he drove out in his beat-up Volvo, passing through winding country roads until he saw it. The silhouette of the Harrow house against the evening sky, looming atop Mirror Hill like a dying king. The house was enormous, Victorian style with turrets, gables, and shutters that hung crookedly like they were too tired to keep pretending. Ivy choked the brick walls, and the windows reflected nothing, just void. As Daniel stepped out of his car, he felt it immediately. A pressure in the air, like being underwater. The trees were silent. Not a single bird chirped. The wind rustled the dry grass, but the house itself seemed to absorb all sound. Camera rolling, Daniel began narrating. This is Daniel Marsh, and I'm standing outside the infamous Harrow house on Mirror Hill, where 40 years ago, the family inside disappeared without explanation. Tonight, I'll be staying inside this house until dawn, and I'll be recording everything. He turned off the camera, walked up the crooked stone path, and reached the front door, a heavy oak slab scarred by time and weather. He knocked once, more out of habit than expectation, then grabbed the rusted handle and pulled. To his surprise, the door creaked open without resistance, revealing a dark hallway smelling of mildew and dust. Classic, he muttered. He stepped inside. The instant his foot crossed the threshold, the air seemed to change, colder. He turned to prop the door open, but it shut behind him with a loud thud, startling him enough to drop his flashlight. It clattered on the hardwood floor, spinning, casting wild shadows across the walls before coming to a stop. "Great start," he said, voice slightly unsteady. He picked up the flashlight and looked around. The entry hall was vast, lined with torn wallpaper and a long, dusty rug that stretched into the gloom. Faint moonlight trickled in through the broken stained glass above the door, painting fragmented colors across the dust. He took a breath and moved forward. The floor creaked with every step, the kind of creak that sounded more like a complaint than a warning. Portraits lined the walls, faded faces, stiff postures, eyes that seemed too detailed. He stopped at one, a painting of a young girl with pale blonde hair and an old-fashioned dress, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes were unnerving. They weren't just painted well, they seemed aware. He shook his head, took a photo, and moved on. In the parlor, the furniture was covered in white sheets, ghostly forms in the dark. Dust floated like snow in the beam of his flashlight, An old gramophone sat on a table near the fireplace, its needle still resting on a cracked record. He half expected it to start playing. He walked into the dining room, where a long table sat beneath a rotting chandelier. Chairs were pushed out like the family had just stood up. His recorder picked up his murmured commentary as he noted the decay, the smell, the peculiar silence that pressed on his ears like cotton. He was about to head upstairs when he noticed something peculiar. Every room he entered had at least one mirror. They varied in size and style. Some were mounted, others leaned against walls, some cracked, some pristine, but they were always there. He found it odd, but interesting. Maybe the family had an obsession. Maybe it was part of the local legend. He noted it in his journal and continued upstairs, unaware that in the mirror just behind him, his reflection had not moved.
Daniel climbed the creaking staircase, each step groaning as if protesting his presence. The air grew colder with every foot he ascended, and despite the stillness, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched closely. The hallway upstairs was narrow and dark, with faded floral wallpaper peeling away like dead skin. Dust blanketed everything, muting colors and turning once fine furniture into shapes lost to time. He began opening doors, documenting each room. The first bedroom was modest, containing a child's bed, scattered toys, and a small wooden vanity. That's when he noticed the mirror above it, untouched by dust, its glass pristine. He leaned in and saw his reflection staring back, but something felt off. His face looked slightly delayed, a second behind his movements. He blinked. So did it, eventually. He turned away quickly, the hair on his neck rising. It was probably just his nerves or a flaw in the glass, he told himself. Moving to the next room, he entered what must have been the master bedroom. The walls were cracked picture frames, all empty. A large, full-length mirror stood at the foot of the bed, ornate and clean. Daniel checked his reflection again. This time he saw a figure sitting on the edge of the bed behind him. His heart stopped. He spun around, raising his flashlight. The room was empty. He turned back to the mirror. No figure. Just him. Okay, he muttered, more shaken now. Stress. Just stress. But the unease had begun to grow inside him like a parasite, gnawing away at his journalistic bravado. Every room he entered revealed more mirrors, some cracked down the center like scars, some perfectly intact, all showing reflections that felt wrong. In the upstairs hallway, he passed a small oval mirror on the wall. As he glanced at it, he froze. His reflection was standing still, smiling faintly, even though he wasn't. He leaned in, eyes wide. His reflection slowly raised a hand and waved. He stepped back, heart pounding. That was not a trick of light. That was something else. He backed away and walked faster, suddenly desperate to find a part of the house not haunted by glass. But it was no use. In the study, the mirror above the fireplace showed the same room, but in daylight, pristine and new. A woman in a long black dress brushed her hair at a desk. She turned, looked directly at Daniel, and smiled. He gasped and stumbled backward. The moment his flashlight beam flicked across the glass again, the woman was gone. Shaken, he checked the footage on his camera. It recorded nothing. Just dust and empty furniture. "This isn't real," he whispered, voice trembling. "It's a trick, a hallucination." He pulled out his notebook and tried to write, but his pen wouldn't work. He opened a drawer in the study desk and found an old ink pen, still wet. On impulse, he dipped it and scrawled a note, "The mirrors lie." As soon as he wrote the last letter, all the mirrors in the study cracked at once, thin, spiderweb-like fractures that made a sound like bones breaking underwater. Daniel screamed and backed into the doorframe, shaking. He had to leave. Whatever was happening wasn't just visual, it was inside the house, alive and reaching for him. He rushed back downstairs, feet thundering down the stairs, heart racing. The front door. He ran to it, yanked it open, and stood face to face with the same hallway he had just left. The upstairs hallway. He turned around, and behind him was the parlor. The house had folded in on itself. Logic failed, time buckled. He ran room to room, opening every door. They all led somewhere different now. Some back to the same place, others to rooms he hadn't even seen. The mirrors became more erratic. In one, he saw himself walking behind his real body. In another, he watched a boy crawl into a mirror and disappear. In the dining room, a long table sat under the flickering chandelier, and in the mirrors around the room, a family was seated, decaying, still, grinning. The Harrows. Daniel watched in frozen terror as one of the mirrored children turned to look at him, face warped with rot, and mouthed, "You're late." He ran again, breath ragged, slamming doors, tripping over rug edges. At one point he found himself in the entryway again, tried the door, and this time it opened to reveal himself standing outside in the yard, staring blankly back. Then the door slammed shut. Daniel collapsed against it, panting, mind unraveling. He realized then that the house was more than haunted. It wasn't just showing things, it was feeding on fear, on time, on him. His watch was frozen at 3:33 a.m. His phone was dead, and in the mirror nearest him, his reflection slowly tilted his head in the wrong direction. Daniel sat slumped against the front door, trembling, sweat mixing with the dust clinging to his face. The house had broken something inside him, a fracture he could feel widening with every breath. He couldn't trust what he saw, what he heard, or even what he remembered. Every mirror whispered now, soft voices bleeding through the glass like steam hissing from a cracked pipe. Some mirrors showed other rooms, others showed impossible places, cemeteries, long hallways that went on forever, or versions of himself standing still, grinning grotesquely with wide, unnatural eyes. He pulled himself up, determined to find some explanation, to understand why the house wouldn't let him go. Deep inside, a voice whispered that there was no escape, not anymore. Still, he moved, staggering into the basement door he hadn't noticed before. The handle was cold and sticky, and when he pulled it open, a thick, wet smell drifted upward, iron, mold, and decay. He descended the narrow stairs with only his flashlight, the air growing damp and heavy. At the bottom, he found a massive circular room lined with mirrors floor to ceiling. Some were cracked, others were covered in what looked like dried blood. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror taller than the others, framed in tarnished gold, its surface rippling slightly like liquid. As he approached, Daniel's reflection appeared, but it wasn't mimicking him. It was just standing there, smiling. Then it moved forward, pressing its hand to the glass from the inside. Daniel stumbled back, shaking. The reflection began mouthing words he couldn't hear, so he inched closer. "Let me out. Take your place." The glass shimmered. A cold wind howled through the basement. The other mirrors began to hum. One by one, ghostly shapes appeared in them, dozens of them, men, women, children, all pale, all smiling, all watching. Their eyes were hollow. He recognized a few from missing person reports he had skimmed while researching the house. And then he saw them, the Harrow family, in the central mirror, standing just behind his reflection, hands resting on his shoulders as if he were already one of them. Daniel screamed, the sound swallowed by the room. The mirror flashed white, and then he was somewhere else. Or, rather, somewhen else. The house was clean now, new, lit by candles. The walls were polished, the carpet vibrant, the air warm. He stood in the dining room, and the Harrows were seated at the table. They looked alive, normal, calm. A young girl turned to him, the same girl from the portrait upstairs. She looked directly at Daniel and said, "You shouldn't have come. But now that you have, you must choose." Then everything went black. He awoke in the upstairs hallway, gasping, drenched in sweat. The house was once again decayed, rotten, silent. But something had changed. The mirrors were gone, every one of them shattered. He stood slowly, numb, and walked to the front door. It opened. The sun was rising outside, fog hung low over the hill. The air felt real again. The grass swayed gently. He ran to his car without looking back, drove for miles until he reached a gas station, stumbled in, and collapsed into a chair near the counter. The clerk asked if he needed help, but Daniel couldn't answer. His voice was gone. Later, in the hospital, doctors diagnosed him with acute stress and temporary psychogenic mutism. He stayed silent for weeks. He never spoke about Mirror Hill again, but he wrote about it. In his notebook, the pages were filled with erratic, desperate handwriting, ending with one final line. "It lets you leave, but not all of you leaves with it." In the years that followed, Daniel tried to return to normal life, but something always followed him. He would catch glimpses in windows, in polished surfaces, his reflection smiling when he wasn't. He stopped using mirrors, started covering them. But still, he would hear soft tapping from the bathroom mirror late at night. Whispers would slither through the dark. "We're still here." Friends said he looked different, more hollow. He didn't laugh the same. One day he simply vanished. His apartment was locked from the inside. The only clue was his notebook, lying open on the floor near the bathroom door. The final page was blank, except for a single sentence scrawled in trembling ink. "You can only look so long before something looks back." Since then, no one who investigates Mirror Hill returns quite the same. Some never return at all. And the house? It waits, silent, watching. Its broken mirrors reflecting not the world, but the things beyond it, waiting for the next visitor bold enough to step inside and foolish enough to look too long.